I want to just tell a couple stories. Some of them will kind of go way back, and then some of them are a little bit more recent. In October 1872, Leon Leonwood Bean was born in Greenwood, Maine. He was the third of 5 children born to Benjamin and Sarah Bean. He had a bit of an interesting childhood. His father died at age 43 in 1884 when Leon was just 12 years old, and his mother died 4 days later at age 41. So he lived with various relatives until he was 18 years old and was shipped off to school. At age 21, LL was sent to come work for his brother in Yarmouth, Maine at his shoe store. LL worked in the shoe and men's clothing business for nearly 20 years, often trying different entrepreneurial ventures and working for different people along the way to feed his growing family. That was his primary motivation. Often when he had another child, so he said, okay, I got to go start another thing. I got to go try something else. That was his kind of background for 20 years, trying different stuff. And in the fall of 1911, he created the shoe that helped him start his own business the next year, which lives on today more than 100 years later. His innovative shoe was born out of necessity to fix the problem of having uncomfortable shoes that allowed his feet to get wet while he was out hunting. So he built a prototype, tested it himself. Some customer walked into the store and he had him test the boot as well. After receiving that feedback, and that customer was featured in the first mailing, after receiving that feedback, he felt like he had enough to go to market. Now again, this was not his first entrepreneurial venture, but he purchased a mailing list and he sent 100, he was able to sell 100 boots. You may well know this story, eventually taking 90 back in returns because the rubber bottom was not strong enough to hold the leather top that it was affixed to. So the founding story of LL Bean is one of problem solving and innovation. And to this day, as Kathy mentioned, innovation remains at the heart of our company's success. I brought a few examples, and some of these are a little more precious than others, and so I hope I don't drop them or somehow spill something on them today. The first innovation is about outerwear. I'm going to share a couple things. This coat, is called the Mountain Light Jacket. It was launched in 1990, and this actual jacket was sent as part of an expedition that LL Bean outfitted to the top of Everest so that the United States and China and the Soviet Union at the time could demonstrate collaboration. And so at the time, this was really innovative. It's actually, you can come up and feel it later, it's actually a little bit heavy compared to what we would be used to today. But at the time, incredibly innovative. It was the very first outerwear piece to ever feature Primaloft insulation, and quite an innovation at the time in 1990. This was worn by Tom Armstrong, our outgoing chief merchant, if any of you know him, I imagine you do. The next one I'd like to show is, this thing is light as a feather, and this is what was in the line last year. It's the exact same amount of warmth, but it features the first ever cross-core technology in a jacket and uses aerogel for its warmth. It's incredibly lightweight. You may have one yourself. If you don't, I know where you can get one. And lastly, what I'm showing you here, this will give you the same amount of warmth. This isn't in the line yet. You've probably never seen it. This we hope to launch in 2021, but we're working on developing what is 100% biodegradable insulation. It'll be the first of its kind. And so that will be, That's an example of innovation on a continuum. Bit by bit, little by little, I think, is how innovation happens, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I want to just talk a little bit about the boat and tote. So this here, you won't recognize this because it doesn't look like they do today, but this was one of the first boat and tote bags launched in 1947. Maine hunting shoe, bean boot, boat and tote. We're not always the most innovative in naming things at LL Bean. This one originally was called the ice carrying bag. And innovation here, they wanted to get a bag into the line, but what they needed to do was they were looking for other partners to buy them from and resell, but in kind of in a way of Yankee ingenuity, they said, hey, can we make one of those ourselves? So sent someone downstairs to the shop and said, hey, we got some canvas laying around, can we make one of those? And that's what you're looking at today. That boat and tote is very iconic, and you would recognize it today out and about. In 2019, thus far, this year, the boat and tote is the number 4 new customer driving product at LL Bean. The last example I want to share of innovation is less about product, but more about reinventing yourself as the world changes. LL Bean's about 107 years old, and I would call it, Mike and I were talking on the way up, maybe 85 years or so of that, the mail order catalog business was the driver of growth and customer expansion, and getting better and better at mailing catalogs to the right people who are going to respond to them and building out a product line that supports their needs was the engine of growth. And so, take back a couple decades, the catalog business represented 100% of LL Bean's sales. Today, it represents about a quarter, maybe a third, and we have an over $1 billion website. And if you think about the last couple of decades at LL Bean, anyone who knows inside politics or how inside baseball works at LL Bean, there's been a massive amount of innovation and change to try and maintain sales, maintain relevancy as the world has shifted. And since that time, we've been able to continue to grow the business at a steady pace. So I want to talk about today a little bit. So I give you a lot of historical examples, maybe one future-facing. But as we look at the way we approach customers, the experiences they want to have, products that will solve problems for them, serving our stakeholders, which include not just employees and shareholders, but the environment at large, and living out our mission of getting more people to enjoy the great outdoors. What's the formula behind that? So back to storytelling. LL Bean passed away in 1967 at the age of 94, having run the company since the age of 40, and he was involved all the way to the end. In that year, 1967, Leon Gorman took over as president of LL Bean. He's sometimes referred to as our second founder. The reason is because when he took over in 1967, the company's sales were $4.75 million. When he stepped down as president and CEO in 2001, we had well over $1 billion in sales. So the LL Bean, as you know it, or as we all know it, really was shepherded under the leadership and stewardship of Leon. He used to hold, Leon, an annual strategy session with his senior leaders and advisors each year, and often in Bethel, Maine. So in 1988, in Bethel, in one of those strategy sessions, I happened to come across an old innovation quote by Leon himself. So many in this room knew Leon, and you'll recognize his voice. I'm going to quote him. He said, LL Bean is a very innovative company. We have a long tradition in developing new ways of meeting our customers' needs. A critical part of our unique character is that of being an innovator in the systematic development of new and improved products, distribution methods, and customer services, as well as of developing new ways of communicating with our customers and with prospective customers. There's a lot of confusion on the issue of innovation and who the innovators really are. It's a matter of definition to a great extent. It's also a matter of not confusing true innovation, which adds real value to products and services, with phony cosmetics and propaganda that add nothing to people's lives but hot air. That's Leon. Innovation at LL Bean means staying close to the customer and paying attention to the thousands of details that add real value to our products and services. There are few, if any, breakthroughs. Innovation at LL Bean is an incremental process based on a rigorous self-examination at all levels against our highest conceivable standards and an equally rigorous assessment of our external situation. We involve our customers in verifying our standards as well as our performance. So, end quote. So I absolutely love Leon's definition because it's so approachable. We can each be innovators in our own spheres of influence by making incremental progress toward improving the lives of people around us. So in closing, if there's one thing I've learned about longevity from my time in working at LL Bean, it's this. Innovation is at the heart of long-term sustainable success. Innovation is not necessarily flashy, but success comes through making incremental progress over time, always striving for that next level. It's about adding real value to people's lives, solving problems they have. And innovation is something that anyone can participate in, from a humble farmer with an idea to any one of us in this room. So while the methods of delivery and types of innovation certainly change over time, the principles of innovation will always remain the same. Thank you.